Deforum Settings Explained Part 1. Hello my friends, how are you doing? In this video we will go over the settings in Deforum for Automatic 11.11. Here is a video that explains how to install Deforum in 11.11, and here is a video how to install 11.11 on your computer. Let's get started here with the settings. The first thing I want to point out is that it makes a very big difference what kind of model you are using. You can choose it up here. So try out different versions. Also from 1.5, there are 3 different versions. There is the in-paint version, the EMA only version, and then also the ProNet version, which is the larger file. This is also made for training different images, different models. So try out these different models here from 1.5, but also from 1.4 and other models you can find online to see what kind of results you're getting from that. Okay, so when you are in the Deforum tab, first of all, up here with info and links, so you want to check out the links that are provided here. Also included here is an official Deforum Discord link. So if you have any questions or any problems with Deforum, please ask them rather than me, because you will get a lot quicker and probably also better answer from them. All right, so under that you have these different tabs, and in this video we're only going to talk about the first 3 tabs because that is settings enough, believe me. So the first one has most of the classic settings you will find in Stable Diffusion, and hands down I will tell you that anything you do with Stable Diffusion, but especially creating videos, will take a lot of experimentation to get the right thing, because there's a ton of settings you can have, and of course everything you change, every little bit can drastically change the output. All right. The good thing that we have in here is that you can override settings, so you can make a check mark here, and then you can load the settings from a text file. Now, how do you write that text file? What should be in there as an information? Well, lucky for you, every time you render something here, this will create a text file with the settings for you, so you can load it from there. So it's pretty good when you come back to a project you're working on, you can simply load it from there. Now down here we have the resolution of the image you want to render. You have the classic choices of restore face, tiling, high-res fix. High-res fix is good with problems where the prompt, because of the ratio of your image, doesn't want to work because it's too wide or it is too high. For example, the double head problem can often be fixed with the high-res fix in here. Now here we have the seed, and then we have our sample methods. You can see there's plenty of them. Experiment with them, try them out, see what you get. Euler A often is pretty good for video rendering. Now, below that, I would like your help to understand this better. There is enable extras, and then you can have a subseed and the subseed strength. I'm not 100% on what this is doing. I was said that you can merge 2 different seeds together. I'm not quite sure why you would want to do that, but the option is there, unless this is doing something else, so I'm not 100 on that. After that, you can see a resize seed from width, so that you can resize the image. With that, you can see both for the width and the height. The render steps below that. With a video, you usually use less render steps because otherwise it will take forever to render your video. But also a good thing here is that the first frame will use the full render steps, and then the second one only as much as you set. So even if you set a higher steps number, the second frame is not going to use that full number. DDIM-ETA, this is only used when you use the DDIM sampler in here, and this will balance between the DDIM and the DDPM method. Try out what that gives you as a result. It might look better or not. It's just 2 different sample methods. Then you can render batches here, which can be useful when you want to find a seed that works well with your prompt idea. So you can render this. You could also possibly make a grid if you want to, and define here the amount of grid rows. Of course, you can save the settings, and you can also save samples. Now below that, we come to some very interesting settings here. The first one is the batch name. This defines the name of the folder that is created for you. So when you experiment a lot, or when you work on different projects, write a different name in here, maybe also give a version number, for example, -1 or -2 or something like that, so you know what you're working on. So every of these settings and frames and GIFs that are created are saved into that specific folder, so you have a little bit more organization on your drive. Next, you have the file name, leave this as it is. And then the seed behavior, this is very important. Now, when you create a video just with the text prompt, what you want to do here is to use the iter for iteration. This will count up the seed, adding 1 every frame. So whatever the seed is, let's say the seed is 1000, the next seed is then for the second frame 1001, 1002, 1003, and so on. Then you can also have a fixed seed. Now that is important when you want to have a video as an input, because there we already have a lot of input information there and we don't want to change away from that input image. So you want to work with a fixed seed. Next is random, which will just give you random images. I don't know why you would use that, maybe for artistic reasons. And then you have also schedule, where you can set the behavior of how the seed is changing per frame over time. So for artistic reasons, that might be really interesting. But as a beginner, just set this to iter and set up all of the settings up here as you want them to have, and just experiment a lot with that. Next, I'm going to go into the prompt tab because the keyframe tab is rather complex. Okay, here we have our input where the prompt goes, and this is rather easy to write. So the format you find here is that you have a quotation mark, then a number. This is the number of the first frame where this prompt should be used. So the first is always 0, another quotation mark, then a colon, a space, another quotation mark, then you write your full prompt, and after that another quotation mark. Now, in case you want to have a negative prompt in there, negative prompt means everything you don't want to see in that image that is going to be rendered. So for example, to say we don't want to have clouds in the sky, we would write, as you can see here where it is explained right there, have a space and then write -- neck and then write, for example, clouds, and then you hope that there will be no clouds in there. There's no guarantee this will work 100%, but this is the method how to exclude things from your prompt. The next thing, if you want to add a second prompt that starts at a later frame, what you want to do here, this is really important. After the quotation mark, you're going to write a comma and then enter to change to the next line. And then you start the same process again, quotation mark, let's say it started frame 50, quotation mark, colon, space, quotation mark, write your prompt in here, quotation mark. Now, again, if you want to add another prompt after that, you write a comma. If you don't want to write another prompt after that, you don't write a comma. That is how easy that is. On top of that, you can also write mathematical formulas into your prompt, but we will not cover that in this video. So let's go to the keyframes next. And here we have a lot of different things to look at. So first of all, you can choose between different methods. This doesn't have all of the methods you find in Deforum because this is still being developed, but you have 2D, 3D, and video input. Now, the difference between 2D and 3D is not that you get a 3D model or a 3D render out of that. That is not what that means. The meaning for that is for these adjustments down here, that the 2D move it as you would a photo when you move it around on your table. So you can push it left, right, up, down, and you can rotate that photo. While when you have 3D, this is more like you would use a camera in a 3D space where you can look to the left, you can look up and down, stuff like that. You can rotate your camera to the side. So more in a 3D sense. And then, of course, the video input means that you can use a video as the input. The video is going to be split into individual JPEGs and then used as an image-to-image render input. All right, so let's start here with 2D. Next, here we have the max frames. This is the amount of frames you're going to render. So when you do a test rendering, I would suggest to you that you create a GIF from your rendering that has 12 frames per second, and then set this up here either to 12 frames or to 24 frames, so you don't waste too much time and you just see if the result looks good. Here we have the border. This is kind of interesting. You can experiment with that. Replicate simply replicates the border pixels on your image. So when you say move the image to the right, then it's going to copy just the same pixels on the edge. And that kind of looks strange, but for artistic reasons, that might make sense. And the other one is wrap, and that will actually work a little bit like outpainting. When you move the image to the side, there is new image content growing in there. Let's go here for our motion parameters. Now, one thing that is really important for all of these values is that you see here a number, a colon, and then a number in a bracket. Now, this means that you can set values per frame. So the first one is always going to start with 0, but then if you want to have a second one, you're writing a comma, and then, for example, say you want to change the value at frame 50, so you write 50 colon round bracket, write a value in here, let's say for example 5, and then another closing round bracket. And so this will now change that value at your 50th frame. So that means when you have, for example, the rotation, you can change the direction of the rotation, you can change the speed of the rotation, and you can also put mathematical formulas into these brackets to change the value over time to have a smoother result. Another important thing here is that you can set most of these values to a positive or negative value. So for example, for the angle, you can set this to -2 to have it spin clockwise, or to +2 to rotate it counterclockwise. So the most important part to understand here is that you have different sections in here, and the settings are only good for the animation mode that you have set up. So you can see here 2D and 3D settings, which means these settings here apply 2D and 3D for the choice up here. Now, when you have the 3D settings, they only apply when you have your 3D applied, not your 2D. So whatever you have put in here does not work when you are in the 2D mode, including the translation set. You would think that's also 2D, but no, that is actually already 3D. And then down here, there's another specific part that is a little bit different. This is a low VRAM pseudo 3D mode. For that to work, when you want to turn this on here, and these settings in here only work when this is turned on, you at the same time also need to be in 2D mode, not in 3D mode. That is very important, because otherwise this stuff here is not going to work. Now let's go here over the settings we have here. Again, these are 2D settings, so understand them as if you have a printed image in front of you lying on the desk. The first one is the angle, and I made here some test renders for you so you can see what's going on. This is simply rotating that image to the side, and then of course trying to get in new parts where the image is having nothing in there. The next one is zoom. I'm not a huge fan of that because often it becomes very blurry. This works better when you use masks, which is a part that I'm not going to cover in this video. When you have this at 1, there is no zooming going on. When you, for example, set it to 1.1, this is going to zoom in, and when you set it to, for example, 0.9, this is slowly going to zoom out. Now, to zoom out, the outpainting looks just very strange. I would suggest to you, if you want to move into the image rather than going with zooming in 2D mode, switch to 3D mode and then use the Z axis, because this is what that's going to do. It is moving into the space or away from that space, and that works a lot better. Next, we come to the translation of the X and the Y axis. Like in classic math, X is left and right, Y is up and down, and then the Z axis we talked about before, this is towards you or away from you. So that means when you use translation X with a value in here, you can set this up to be moved to the left or to be moved to the right, and it will try to create new content for the parts that are going to show up when the image is moving out of the frame. When you're getting bad results from this usually has to do down here with one setting that is the strength schedule. This is the same as we usually have as the denoise setting. So here you maybe want to have a lower setting, for example 0.5, in which case the content of the image is going to change a lot from frame to frame. But when you set this up higher here, for example to 7.5 or 8, the content of the image from frame to frame will be more similar. But in that case, when you do these translations here, they might end up by repeating the image in just a second copy or doing some other strange things. So if you have these problems, play around with that setting. Now in this 3D settings, we have 4 different settings because translation set, as we already said, is to move into the room, away from you or towards you. So that's kind of a 3D move. Now the rotations are easily understood when you imagine them as rotations around that axis. So rotation 3dx is, when we look here at the x-axis, a rotation around that axis. So what does that mean? If we have here rotation x, this means that we are looking up or down. When we have a rotation around the epsilon axis, we are looking to the right or to the left. When we have a rotation around the z axis, this is what's called tilting. It's basically kind of the same as what you do here with the angle up there, so that the image is rotated to the left or to the right. Now I want to give you an advice here. These often don't create so amazing results, especially with trying to come up with new content that replaces the empty parts that are showing up inside of your frame. So if you don't need this movement for artistic reasons specifically in the render, I would say to not render it as a movement inside of Deforum, but rather keep the image static and then introduce the rotation or the zooming afterwards in your video editing software, because that way you get a lot better results. Sometimes you can even render a scene maybe in a little bit higher resolution and then move the image, for example, from left to right or up to down, so you can avoid the translation X and translation Y and get a much better looking result. Next down here we have our low ramp pseudo 3D mode. Personally, I think the results don't look good at all. So here you can see the theta movement. I don't know why they didn't give it the same name as up here so you understand what it is, but this is what phi is doing and this is what gamma is doing. And down here you have your perspective flip FV. So for this value here, that is important because especially for the theta, which is the rotation, this is like the point that is rotating around. So the bigger the value here is, the further away is that rotation point. And this value in here can be set from 30 to 160. So for the theta, I have found that 30 in here is the best value. When you use phi or gamma, you can try with higher values. For the generation settings, this is what you'll find classically in Stable Diffusion. Not all of them, but some of them. Now, the first one, noise schedule, is how much noise you want to introduce in every frame. The second one is the strength schedule. This is what we usually know as the denoise scale. So for example, if you render image to image, this defines how closely it will stick to the original image or change the image. Now in this case, what this means for us is that there will be more or less similarity to the frame we have seen before. So for example, if you set a value here for 0.9, that is going to be very similar to the last frame, but you might have some problems with these movements that we have adjusted before. And when you go very low, for example 0.3, this is going to be very different from the last frame. So these effects up here, they might look better, they might work better, but at the same time you are having a lot of jumping around from the shapes and the content of your image. So try to stick between 0.5 and 0.8. Now this changes a lot with the masks you can use, because the masks define the strength in the strength schedule. That will give you more changes in some parts of the image and then less changes in the other parts of the image, and can really enhance your result. I will cover this in a later video. The contrast schedule is simply how much contrast you want to have in your image. And then the CFG scale, again, that is interesting. This is how closely the rendering is going to stick to your prompt. So 7 is an average that you mostly going to use. So I would say everything between 7 and 15 is going to give interesting results depending on the prompt and how much strength that prompt requires. Some need more, some need less. Down here we have the 3D field of view setting. For the FOV schedule, the value you put in here has a big impact on how strongly these settings up here react to the numbers you put in here, so experiment with that. For the near and far value, I don't know what that is. If you understand this, please let me know in the comments. Down here we have the seed schedule. This is what we have seen in the first step, where you can use a mathematical formula to adjust yourself how the seed is changing through the progression frame by frame. In the coherence, we have a color setting. This will just select what kind of color mode you are wanting to use. It is set to lab, and that seems to work fine. The diffusion cadence, on the other hand, is pretty interesting, and this is especially good if you have a slower computer. In this case, when you, for example, set this to 2, this means it will only render every second frame. And that means that it will, for example, render the first frame and the third frame, and then make up the second frame by blending between the first and the third frame, so that you save on render time, but at the same time you will end up with the same amount of frames. This can sometimes help to give you a smoother video result. The next setting for the 3D depth wrapping I'm going to cover in a later video. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Share it to your friends if you can. And thanks for watching. Bye. Oh, you're still here. So this is the end screen. There's other stuff you can watch like this or that. It's really cool. And yeah, I hope I see you soon. Leave a like if you haven't yet. And well, yeah, I wish you a good weekend.